The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, guys. Just wanted to give a bit of a heads up. We're just going to hang tight for about 2 minutes while we wait for a couple more people to join, and then we'll get things started. Thanks for your patience. Alrighty, let's get things started. I'll share my screen here so that you can see our presentation. That should now be displaying on your screen there. So first off, just wanted to wish everyone that they're safe at the moment with everything that's going on. I know a few people may not be able to attend as a result of all the kind of craziness that's going on at the moment. Fortunately, this will be shared both on YouTube as well as to any attendees who enrolled. So if there's any staff that weren't able to attend today's session for whatever reason, and they did enroll, they will receive a copy of the recording at the conclusion once all the processing's been done through to their email addresses that they enrolled with. Okay, so for the guys who were able to attend the training sessions in New South Wales, we're going to cover a bit of ground that may be similar to what we saw there. Because in essence, there hasn't really been any kind of huge changes. It's more just fine tweaking. And we're going to go through a little bit about how to prepare for the AHO report, as well as how to actually run that report. So first thing I wanted to talk about was the solutions that we've set up. So you'll see here 2 links for solutions on how to, first of all, prepare for the AHO report, and second of all, how to run the AHO report. So these solutions are on our knowledge base. So I've set these up here, and I'll just click through to them just to give you a bit of a overview of what they actually are. So you can see here the first one, and this is just our knowledge base for anyone that is wondering what this is on. So you can see here, first of all, we have the solution for how to prepare. So this is going to be a bit of a one-off setup for some of the data that has been entered into your system to make sure that the accuracy of the report is aligned with what AHO are expecting. And we're going to have a look at this today in terms of how to set these up. So fear not. The second one we have here is how to run the AHO report. So this one's actually super simple, and you'll see it's a much shorter solution because the legwork really is in that setup as a kind of one-off, and then moving forward as you enter in new tenants, you'll be maintaining that as you would with any other data that you input. Cool, so that's the solution there on how to run the AHO report, and we'll also have a look at that a little bit later. So I'm going to be doing a bit of switching around today between screens. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask. So we do have some of the staff here awaiting your questions, so feel free to type them in the chat there and they'll get answered shortly. If there's something that comes up after this or you feel wasn't addressed in the chat there, you're welcome to send through a support ticket and we can address your issues there. Cool. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the clients. So I'm just going to go through each screen or each area, the key areas that will require some changes or some focus on your data. Some of these, if you've been maintaining these correctly and accurately, as hopefully everyone has, means that there won't be much to do on your end. Some of these are new fields, so I'll highlight those or give special mention to those when we come across them. So the first screen, or the first area that we're going to look at here is the client section. So you can see here the household structure has been highlighted. And so the household structure, if I can get my little pointer guy, the household structure is over here. And this is on any client screen whereby you have a primary tenant and a non-primary tenant. So as always in Chintaro, there's always one primary tenant for each tenancy. And from there, you can have non-primary tenants. Typically, this is the person that has signed the tenancy agreement, and then you have others in the household. They're not always going to be, a spouse relationship. They could be friends, they could be strangers. But we do need to have this household structure set up to reflect accurately the makeup of that household. And obviously that's very important for the AHO to understand who is being tenanted in their properties and how many people as well. So I'm going to have a quick flick to Chintaro here to demonstrate what that is. So I'll pull this across. And let's jump into our client here. Now, here we have our primary tenant, Mr. Beckham. He's fallen on hard times. And you can see over here, we have the option to select whether that person is a primary tenant. And if we click on Victoria here, and I'll double click on her, that will take us to her client profile. You can see here that she's been set up as a no. So this means that she's not a primary tenant. And on doing so, I'm just going to erase that by selecting yes. On clicking that, you'll get this pop up here asking which tenancy you would like to link this individual to or this client to. So I'm going to select David Beckham, update, and you'll see that that is now linked. Another key field for the AHO is this relationship here. So clarifying what that dynamic is between the people living in the household. So obviously this is wife here, and you have the option of child and student. The other kind of key area that AHO will be looking at is date of birth. So here we have the date of birth recorded. This is important to capture, I guess, at the time of enrolling the client. If for whatever reason that information isn't available, the AHO have advised that if you do know the individual's age, you can put in the first and the corresponding year. So in this case, if you knew David was, Victoria was 42 years old, you would then put 1st to the 1st, 1978. That's not ideal. You should be clarifying this information when enrolling the client, but for whatever reason, if you need to capture that information there, you can. I've also noticed here that Romeo isn't a part of that household, so I'm just going to demonstrate that process again. Hopefully you're reasonably familiar with this. We do have solutions on making a primary tenant versus a non-primary tenant and linking those, but just to demonstrate again, we just click no on the tenant that we don't want to be our primary one. And I'll select David again here and I'll update. And relationship, this is Romeo, so that will be, dare I say, a son. And it is a child student, so yes, I'm going to reflect that, and the age is up to date here. So this will need to be done for all the households within Chintaro that are going to be reported on for AHO. And as I said before, hopefully this is something that you're doing already. If not, it's something that you will have to look at doing. Cool, I'm just going to jump back to our presentation here. The next section that we're going to be looking at is the tenancy screens. So the key change here that we're going to be looking at is this here, the leaving reason. So this must be updated upon vacating. So obviously David is a current tenant of ours. So we don't need to fill out this information, but upon vacating the tenancy, we do need to have this filled out here. And as you can see over here, there's actually a predefined list of the options that the AHO would like you to fill out. They're pretty all-encompassing, and a few in there that you're not going to come across that often, but the idea here is that it's going to be a predefined list so that all organizations are consistently reporting the same information. So let's jump into Chintaro and have a quick squiz at that. Let's look at David's tenancy. And I'm just going to jump into his client profile here, view tenancy. Okay, so that's taken me to his tenancy reason here. Now, obviously, David hasn't been vacated over here, but I will go in and select a reason anyway. And for the astute of you watching, you'll actually notice that these are a little bit different to that list that I just demonstrated. This may be the case with your database. So you can see here, these are actually quite different. So I need to go in and change these. So for some of these fields, particularly the new ones, you will need to change these at a table level. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. This process is in the solution with steps on how to do this, but for the sake of demonstration, let's have a look at that. So we want the leaving reason here. So I'm going to go to my home button. I'm going to go to system maintenance because this is where all the settings are. And from system maintenance, I'm going to go into reference tables. So this is all our drop downs, all our customizable fields. They can be selected and modified from in here. Now, what I would ideally be doing here is referring back to my solution here. I'm preparing the AHO, and I would jump down right to the bottom, and you can see here I've got those little tables set up. So I'm just looking for the reason for leaving, and that's here. So I'm now going to put that on my second screen. So that will disappear for you guys, and I'm just going to refer to that there. And I'll come down to the table that I'm looking for. And that is this one here, reason for leaving, and I can see all the options there. Now I'm not going to go through and update all of these just for the sake of time, but I will demonstrate how that works here. So long-term care, and as soon as I click away, that has now been changed. Short-term care, so on and so forth. I'm not going to do it for all of these. It's just more to demonstrate the point. Now, if we go back to our tenancy and we have a look at Mr. Beckham, when I select that reason for leaving, those options are now there. So that long-term care that I put in and the short-term care. Cool, and that's it for tenancy. So pretty straightforward for the tenant there, just on vacating the leaving reason. Cool, and we'll jump back in. All right, so the next one we want to look at is properties. So there's a few changes to properties, and this is obvious because AHO wants to get a bit of a snapshot of the properties that they're funding, what their current state of play is, and obviously being able to report on those accurately. So the first one there, you'll see that what was previously for some states ISIP has now been replaced by the AHO number. And this corresponds with the number provided by the AHO for the particular property. If you're unsure about this, please reach out to the AHO. In some instances, we have been updating these for our cloud customers, where we have been provided with those addresses, or sorry, rather those AHO numbers. You may need to go in and update these yourself to reflect the accurate number required. Next one we want to have a look at is the properties. So this is something that you will most certainly already be doing, filling out the address details. The one thing that you will want to keep in mind here is the importance of the spacing here. So because these are being uploaded to the Namuru portal for the AHO, they do need to be set in a certain way. So you can see here spacing is very important. So my address is spaced out correctly, just as if you were writing, say, a letter on an envelope. The postal address you want to have spaced out neatly. This includes if you were to have a unit or a lot number. And the other key thing there is also making sure that the full words are put into the system. So you can see there I've got street, not ST. It'd be road, ROAD, not RD, for example. This may change in the future, but for now, it does need to be spelled out correctly. I'm not going to demonstrate these in Chintaro because these are pretty self-explanatory. A new field that you will notice is the property condition, and we will have a look at this. So what we need to do is when this property comes into our possession and when we inspect it, we need to make sure that we're accurately reflecting the condition of the property. So you can see here we have a couple of options that will be added in. We've got below maintained standard, maintained, and well maintained. And you can see over here, the areas that we want to fill out are here. So this particular property is well maintained, and also the date at which that was assessed as well maintained. So I'll have a quick squiz at that in Chintaro by jumping into the property. Great, so I can see my AHO number here, and that's just a simple modification. If I wanted to change that or what have you, that can be done from here. Got my addresses, and I have my property condition down here. So these also will need to be customized. I'm not going to jump into the reference tables because I've already demonstrated that. If you do get stuck, that's going to be in the solution as well. So you'll have something to refer back to. Or you may want to do this while listening to the webinar. So as I said, this is going to be available. So maybe having this in the background while you go through the first couple of these could be useful for you. And also the property condition right here. So again, that's just the date at which that assessment, well maintained, was made. Cool. All right, so the other thing that we want to look at with properties, in particular rooms, is periods of vacant untenantable. So obviously any property that is vacant untenantable is sitting idly. And if it's one of the AHO properties, they want to get a bit of an understanding as to what might be the motivator behind why that property isn't being used and why it can't be tenanted. So the options here are quite straightforward and simple. You have vacant restoration. So often after a tenant moves out, you may need to do, say, a day of cleaning or any kind of tweaks that need to happen before the next tenant can move in. So that would typically be a vacant restoration. Major works planned or major planned works is more for kind of scheduled things like an overhaul. So after the tenant has moved out, you then want to do a bit of renovation because it's quite deteriorated as a result of that tenancy, and you may need to make that vacant untenantable. And the last option there, NA or not applicable. So that's a bit of a catch-all for other things. That said, you should ideally be flagging these as either vacant restoration or, excuse me, major planned works. Let's have a look at how that works in Chintaro. All right, so I'll just jump into a property that does have some spare rooms. All right, so I can see these ones here. Typically, this is going to be more as part of the workflow of when you're vacating a tenant. You're going to be setting this status. Up here, we have the vacant untenantable button. So this is going to take me to the options for creating a vacant untenantable property or room rather. And it's quite simple. So I will just select the date that it's unavailable from. So when the property is no longer accessible. So let's say that was last Wednesday through to the following Wednesday. Over here, I've got my options here that I've pre-configured from those reference tables. Let's say that there is some major works planned. This property is getting a bit of a redo. And then I'll just click this button here. And you can see that this has updated. So we've got our status here, and this will then be reflected in reporting. And obviously this is important because it gives the AHO some understanding about what downtime properties face or rooms face, and perhaps how they can be mitigated or minimized in future events, or just get a better understanding of the efforts that you guys go through in maintaining these properties to a sufficient standard. And the last field that we're going to look at here is maintenance tasks. So on that topic of maintaining to a standard, AHO are very interested in the maintenance that's occurring against properties. And you can see a lot of boxes kind of highlighted here, so please don't feel overwhelmed. These are all typical boxes that would get filled out anyway, or should at least. And essentially, they're just kind of giving an overview of the maintenance tasks that have been raised against a property, the urgency of that particular maintenance task, the nature of it, whether it's responsive or whether it's a cyclical. So the difference there being the tenant's called up and said, hey, this is busted. That would be a responsive versus a cyclical, which would be just kind of your typical ongoing maintenance. So in Victoria, we have legislation around gas heaters being serviced, I believe it is annually. So that would be an example of a cyclical maintenance task there. The other fields there, we have the actual completion date. So that differs obviously from the scheduled completion date, which is when you estimate it will be finished. Actual completion is when it, surprise, actually is completed. And also the reported date. So this one here is a responsive task. So the tenant called up, they called up on the 25th of the 1st, and we can see that took approximately a month to rectify or to actually complete. And I'm just referring to these periods here. So the 25th of the 1st, that's when it was reported, and the actual completion, the 28th of the 2nd there. So these are quite key. If you're not currently filling these out, you will need to. They can be retrospectively filled out, retrospectively, meaning that you can go back and change these. So even though you raised this task by clicking that add new task, you can go back and backdate these if needed or bring them forward if needed. So let's have a look at that in Chintaro. So I'm going to go over to my maintenance and I'm just going to grab the first one here. Alrighty. So the key things that we're looking at here is the maintenance type. Got a few options here. Typically, it's going to be mostly cyclical and responsive that you're going to be selecting here. The other thing that I want to look at here is the urgency. Given that this is a cyclical quarterly gutter cleaning, it's obviously not going to be urgent, so I'm just going to flag that as standard. If you're wondering what classifies something as standard versus urgent, there is some detail around this in some of the inspection documents provided by the New South Wales. But I do understand that there's a little bit of interpretation around what actually qualifies for urgent versus standard. So you may need to use some discretion in determining those for yourself. All right, so I can see over here my reported date is blank. So I want to go ahead and fill that. Let's say this was reported on the 17th. And I'll go over here to my completion details. So this is how I would finalize a maintenance task. And I can see here that the actual completion hasn't been filled out. So let's go and select a date there. Perfect. All right, so I can see there that my actual completion date has been filled out. And from the perspective of Chintaro, this maintenance task has been completed. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you're hitting this button here and jumping in to fill out your actual completion dates. And this is something very important to elicit because obviously this feeds into if something's urgent, this actual completion date versus the reported obviously needs to be 24 to 48 hours depending on the nature of the urgency there. So AHO wants to get some line of sight of that. And that is essentially it in terms of the actual changes that you'll be making within Chintaro. So hopefully most of those you are doing yourself. There are a couple of additions that you will have to go in and add moving forward. But yeah, as I said before, those will just be kind of a one-off thing, and then it will just be a case of maintaining your data as these events unfold, as you would anyway in Chintaro. Cool, so we'll jump back into our PowerPoint here and we'll have a look at the next slide. Oh, it's running it. So pretty straightforward on how to run this, as I said before, but let's have a look through this. Again, I have over here on my other screen how to run the AHO report. This is a good one to have, kind of on standby and be referring to when you are going through these steps, because it does give you a bit of a blow by blow. So reading here, obviously I've got to prepare for it. We've done that. Next step, running the occupancy calculation. Now this is a really integral step for most of your reports, especially your statutory ones that you're going to be submitting. This is a requirement because essentially what the occupancy calculation does is it does all the maths behind the actual submission of the report. So you need to make sure that this is reflective of the period that you're going to be reporting on. So I've just gone in here to Home, Reports and Exports, clicked on that, and I can see here occupancy calculation. I'll click that, and over here it's got all my calculations I've done by date, and you can see some I've done here. The last period I reported on was this one here. That was today, and that was for January. So with these AHO reports, you are going to be submitting them on a monthly basis. So what I want to do is create a new calculation, and let's do this for February. So I'll pick the first day of February, which will be a Saturday, and I'll pick the last day of February, which is going to be a Saturday as well. And I'll click calculate. It's as simple as that. This is the period I'm reporting on. So this is the information that I want to be calculated. And I'll click calculate. Now, if you're doing these for other kind of reports, the larger this date is, the longer this process is going to take. But you can see here, the occupancy calculation has run very quickly because we're just looking at 1 month period here. You'll also notice in the bottom left here, I'll just see if I can do a spotlight. Down here, it'll give you a bit of a blow by blow of where you're at in the progress with this status bar here. I'm not sure if you're able to see that, but I'm just referring to the bottom left here. It says populating tenancies, and there's a bit of a gray bar here. So if you're wondering what's going on, if you see this as not full, that means the calculation's still running. So if you've got a lot of data, a lot of tenancies, or you're selecting a very big time period, this will take some time because it is doing a lot of maths and number crunching behind the scenes. So please be patient. Alrighty, so I'm going to click OK on that. Oops, I've selected the wrong thing there. Let's see if we can make that go away. There we are. All right, so I've done my calculation. Looking at my next step over on my other screen here. All right, looks like we just jump into the report now. Pop that back to the side. So we've done our calculation. Let's go have a look at the report. So it is a New South Wales report. Here it is, facts AHO reporting. Cool. So now all I do here is I select the period I want to report on. So the start date, we're doing February for this one. So exactly same dates as we did that calculation for. Where's the end of February? There we are. I need to select my output folder. So this is going to select where on my computer this file will actually save, or files rather, I should say. I'm just going to save this to the desktop. I do recommend saving this to a folder of which you know the path, because it's just important to have good file management. Alrighty, so I've got my dates here, I've got my output. Now all I need to do is select the programs that I wish to report on. So I can select one here by going through all these. This is probably the program that you're going to want to report on. I'm just going to select a couple for the sake of demonstration. And all I did there was hold down Shift, or if I hold down Control, I can pick little ones like that. I'm just going to go with these guys just to make sure that we've got some data in there, and also that it's not going to take too long running the report. All right, and that's as simple as that. I've got my dates, got my output, got the programs I want to report on. Click Create Files. Now again, this may take a little bit, just depending on how much data you're generating and the calculations or the formatting required based off that. So it's having a look through all the tenancies in those programs and feeding that data into the spreadsheet. And that took, what, 20 seconds? The report has now been completed. So I've got that pop up. And just on my other screen, I have 4 files that have been produced. We want to have a look at 2. So I'm just going to move these across. Oh, and hopefully I can demonstrate this. If not, I'm just going to open these on my other screen here. No, I can't. So I'm just going to open the 2 that I want. And the 2 that I want are the ones that say monthly. And you can see here, it's got all the data in it. And I don't really need to do anything with these. I'll just open up that other one there. This one's going to look a little bit different. It's more about the structure. Those are the 2 files that we're going to need. So it'll say monthly in those titles of the file types, and they're the ones that we want to then take and submit to the Namaru portal. We don't have access to that, so unfortunately I can't demonstrate that side of things. But from what Mark has shown at the AHO, that is very simple. It's just a case of selecting the files and uploading them. So I'll jump back to my Chintaro here. And that, in a nutshell, is how to run the AHO report. So the actual process of running it, given that you're going to be doing that side of things monthly, is very straightforward. And that's going to ease a lot of your load of doing those 6 monthly or biannual reports that you had to do that were very manual and labor intensive. So hopefully this makes your job a lot easier, which is always kind of what we're trying to achieve with Chintaro. But you do need to make sure that you've got all that set up accurately done so that the information you're submitting to the Namaru and the AHO is reflective of the current state of play. So if you have any questions about this that weren't addressed during this webinar, please, you're welcome to stick around for a little bit and pop those in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to drop us a ticket and we can assist you as you need. Hopefully this has been useful and insightful for you. And yeah, I just wish that everyone is staying safe in these uncertain times and practicing good hygiene. And yeah, thanks so much for attending, and we'll be in touch in the coming days. Thank you, everyone.